The dream of peace has a specific scent. For me, it was the smell of freshly sawn cherry wood, the earthy perfume of potting soil after a light rain, and the faint, clean aroma of latex paint. It was the scent of a new beginning, a life meticulously engineered away from the crushing pressures and zero-sum negotiations of my previous one. My new house in Willow Creek Estates was the physical manifestation of that dream. A modest but solid single-story home, with a garage big enough for the woodworking shop I'd fantasized about for 30 years, and a backyard that basked in the perfect amount of afternoon sun for the garden I planned to cultivate. After a career spent wrangling billion-dollar infrastructure projects, navigating labyrinthine bureaucracies, and staring down men who would sue their own shadow for a zoning variance, this quiet suburban cul-de-sac was supposed to be my sanctuary, my decompression chamber, my reward. I had closed on the house a week prior, but the official move-in date, as stipulated by the seller's agent, was Saturday. A mere formality, she'd said. My lease was up on Friday, and the moving company, a highly rated local outfit, had an unexpected cancellation for Thursday afternoon. It seemed like a gift from the universe. A quick call to the agent confirmed the sellers were already in another state. "Go for it, Alex," she'd chirped. "The house is yours." So, on a bright, cloudless Thursday, the large moving truck rumbled down the immaculate, tree-lined street of my new life, its air brakes hissing as it pulled to a stop. We had been unloading for less than 20 minutes when she appeared. She didn't walk so much as materialize on the edge of my new lawn, her posture as rigid as the decorative, non-functional shutters on her own identical house next door. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked like it could deflect small arms fire, and a face pinched into a permanent state of disapproval. She wore a pastel pink tracksuit that seemed at odds with the severity of her expression. In her arms, she cradled a small, white dog with trembling legs and bulging, accusatory eyes. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. The two movers, a pair of burly young men carrying my favorite leather armchair, paused on the ramp, their momentum broken. I wiped a sheen of sweat from my brow and walked over, extending a hand with a smile I hoped conveyed friendly, harmless retiree. "Hi there. I'm Alex Sterling, your new neighbor." She completely ignored my hand, her gaze flicking from my face to the truck, to a patch of grass near the curb where one of the truck's tires had ever so slightly encroached upon the manicured lawn. The indentation was no more than an inch deep. "I'm Carol Peterson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association," she said, president with the same gravity a person might use for Supreme Allied Commander. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Carol," I said, letting my hand drop, the friendly smile feeling suddenly stiff on my face. "I'm so excited to be here. It's a beautiful neighborhood." "It is," she stated, a clear implication in her tone that its beauty was a fragile thing, constantly under threat from interlopers like me. "And we maintain that beauty through strict adherence to the community bylaws. Bylaws which, I might add, you are already violating." I blinked. "I'm sorry." She pointed a perfectly manicured finger towards the truck. "Article 7, Section C, Paragraph 4 of the Willow Creek Covenants. Conditions and restrictions clearly states that all moving activities are restricted to weekends, from 9:00 a.m. Saturday to 6:00 p.m. Sunday, to minimize disruption to residents." She then gestured with her chin to the tire on the grass. "Furthermore, Article 9, Section A prohibits the parking of any commercial vehicle, including moving trucks, on any landscaped area, including lawn verges." I felt a small, bemused smile touch my lips. It was absurd. But I was determined to start off on the right foot. I had managed negotiations between warring municipal governments. I could surely handle this. Ah, I see. My sincerest apologies. Carol, my lease was up, and the movers had a last-minute opening. The house was empty, so I really didn't think it would be a problem. As for the lawn, I'll make sure the driver moves the truck immediately. We'll be out of your hair in a couple of hours. Her expression did not soften. It was like trying to reason with a granite statue. It is not a matter of being a problem. It is a matter of the rules. The rules exist for a reason. They are the bedrock of this community's property values and quality of life. Your move is unauthorized. Today is Thursday. She said the word Thursday as if it were a vile curse. The movers were now standing awkwardly by the truck, watching the exchange. I could feel the clock ticking on their hourly rate. "Look, Carol," I said, my tone still patient. "I understand. I've received the HOA packet, and I intend to be a model resident. This was just an honest mistake due to scheduling. If you'll just let us finish unloading, I promise you won't hear another peep out of me." Her eyes narrowed to tiny slits. A mix-up is what happens when you get the wrong coffee order. This is a flagrant disregard for the governing documents you agreed to abide by when you purchased this home. It sets a terrible precedent. She took a step back, pulling her trembling dog closer to her chest. "I have already documented the violations with time-stamped photographs. You have 10 minutes to have this vehicle off the premises before I escalate the matter." I stared at her, my friendly demeanor finally beginning to fray. Escalate to whom? The HOA tribunal? The Supreme Court? It was a moving truck. Escalate it how, exactly? A thin, triumphant smile crossed her lips. It was a genuinely unsettling sight. "You'll see." She turned on her heel and marched back to her house. I sighed and walked over to the movers. "Sorry about that, guys. The welcome wagon seems to be a bit intense. Can we try to shift the truck a little further onto the pavement?" Before they could even answer, Carol had reappeared on her porch, her cell phone pressed to her ear. I heard her voice, clear as a bell in the quiet suburban air. "Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance. There is an unauthorized commercial vehicle and a group of men trespassing at 114 Willow Lane. Yes, it's causing a great deal of distress to the community." I felt a hot flush of disbelief and anger. She was calling the police. On me. For moving into my own house a day and a half early. The movers looked at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and, "We've seen this before." 10 minutes later, just as she'd promised, a police cruiser rolled silently down the street and parked behind the moving truck. A young, tired-looking officer got out, his hand resting on his belt as he surveyed the scene. He looked at the truck, at the half-unloaded furniture, at me, and then at Carol, who was now standing on her lawn with an air of profound vindication, her little dog yapping in her arms. "Good afternoon," the officer said, his voice heavy with the weariness of a man who knew he was being dragged into something utterly pointless. "We had a call about a disturbance." I explained the situation as calmly as I could, showing him the keys to the house and the email from the real estate agent. He listened patiently, nodding. He then walked over to speak with Carol. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see her gesticulating wildly, pointing at the truck, at the grass, at a calendar she'd apparently brought outside with her. The officer's posture remained stoic, but I could practically feel his soul leaving his body. After a few minutes, he returned. "Well, sir," he said, This is a civil matter. It's an HOA dispute. There's no criminal activity here. You're not trespassing since you own the home." He glanced back at Carol, who was now glaring at us both. "My advice: just try to get unloaded as quickly and quietly as you can. And maybe fix that little patch of grass." He gave me a sympathetic nod, got back in his car, and drove away. The movers and I stood in silence for a moment. The dream of peace, the scent of sawdust and soil, had been replaced by the acrid stench of petty tyranny. I looked over at Carol's house. She was watching me from her window, her face a mask of cold fury. This wasn't an introduction. It was a declaration of war. And in that moment, I realized my quiet retirement was going to be anything but. My first official week in Willow Creek was a masterclass in bureaucratic warfare, delivered by mail. The initial salvo arrived on Monday, a crisp, cream-colored envelope with the Willow Creek Estates HOA logo embossed in forest green. Inside was not a welcome letter, but a formal notice of violation. My crime, according to violation number 2025-08A, was improper mailbox height. According to Carol Peterson, President, my mailbox stood at 40.75 inches, a full quarter of an inch below the mandated 41-inch minimum, as outlined in Appendix B of the Architectural Design Guidelines. The notice included a grainy, zoomed-in photograph of my mailbox with a tape measure held next to it, and a declared fine of $50. I laughed. It was so breathtakingly petty it was almost performance art. My old job had involved reviewing structural engineering reports for multi-billion-dollar suspension bridges, where a quarter-inch deviation could be catastrophic. Applying that same scrutiny to a suburban mailbox was insanity. But I was still in de-escalation mode. I wanted peace. That afternoon, I went to the hardware store, bought a new, slightly taller post, and spent 2 hours digging up the old one and setting the new one in concrete, ensuring it was exactly 41.5 inches high. I took my own time-stamped photo and emailed it to the HOA with a polite note of compliance. 2 days later, the second envelope arrived. Violation number 2025-08B. Unauthorized lawn statuary. My offense was a small, cheerful garden gnome I'd placed next to a rose bush, a gift from my grandmother. According to Carol, it violated Article 11, Section D, which prohibited any lawn ornament not explicitly approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Another $50 fine. I sighed and moved the gnome to my back patio, hidden from view. I paid the fine. The violations kept coming. My garbage cans were put out at 7 p.m. on Sunday, an hour before the approved 8 p.m. window. Fine. A small patch of clover appeared in my lawn. Fine. The welcome mat on my front porch was a shade of blue, deemed inconsistent with the approved earth tone palette. Fine. 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 Each notice was a small, paper-based jab, a constant reminder that I was being watched. I decided a strategic, face-to-face approach might work. At the next monthly HOA meeting, I introduced myself, explained my position as a new resident, and politely requested a bit of patience as I learned the ropes. Carol, seated at the head of the room like a queen on her throne, was having none of it. "Thank you for your statement, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "However, the learning curve you refer to is something most residents manage to navigate by simply reading the documents they receive at closing. The rules are not suggestions. They are mandates." She looked out at the small crowd. Complacency is the first step towards decay. I sat down, my face burning. I had been publicly rebuked and used as a cautionary tale. Walking home in the twilight, A sense of profound frustration washed over me. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. As I approached my house, my eyes fell on the property line. Something caught my eye, almost hidden in the grass near the curb. A small, round brass disc set in concrete. A geodetic survey marker. A property pin. A flicker of my old professional self stirred. The part of me that dealt not in suggestions, but in absolutes, in millimeters and legal boundaries. I knelt, brushing the dirt away. It was the official survey pin for the corner of my lot, purely out of habit. An ingrained professional curiosity. My mind began to idly map the boundaries of my small kingdom. For the first time since I'd moved in, I wasn't just thinking like a homeowner. I was thinking like a civil engineer. And a plan, cold and precise as a surveyor's line, began to form in my mind. The shift from bureaucratic warfare to a more insidious campaign began about a month later. The first incident was subtle. I had planted a row of beautiful hybrid tea roses. One morning, I found the blooms on the two plants closest to Carol's property looking strangely wilted and brown, while the others remained healthy. I checked the soil. It felt oddly damp and gritty. A simple taste test confirmed my suspicion. Salt. Someone had poured salt water on the roots of my roses. I had no proof, but I knew. It was a message: I can still touch you. A few days later, one of my sprinkler heads was shattered, as if struck by a hammer. Again, no proof. That was the turning point. I had come for peace, but I was being forced into a siege. That weekend, I invested in a high-end, multi-camera security system, installing 4 discrete, high-definition cameras covering every angle of my front yard. As I worked on the ladder near the property line, I could feel her stare. I didn't look over. I just kept working. That Monday, I was on the phone with David Chen, my former deputy director. 4 cameras, Alex. What the hell is going on? I thought you moved to Pleasantville, he said. Pleasantville has a dragon. Dave. I sighed. And she lives next door. I explained everything. Wow. David whistled. You used to handle mob-connected union bosses, and now you're being taken down by a woman with a ruler. It's different, I said. This is chaos in a pink tracksuit. Hey, Dave, can you do me a favor? Pull the original subdivision plat maps for Willow Creek Estates. The high-resolution survey scans. The ones with the surveyor's original notes. This sounds like more than a mailbox dispute, David said, his voice laced with suspicion. Just a professional curiosity, I lied. I want to see how this place was put together. The files arrived in my inbox just before noon. I opened the master plat map, dated 1986. I cross-referenced it with the recorded deeds, overlaying them in the professional-grade CAD software I still kept on my laptop. For hours, I sat at my computer, and that's when I saw it. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible anomaly, a sliver of land. When the subdivision was laid out, a narrow, 18-inch wide strip running the full 60-foot length of the property line between my lot and Carol's had, for some reason, been sectioned off. It was designated as Parcel R3, a remnant parcel. Such things weren't uncommon. Little slivers of no man's land created by surveying errors. Usually, they were legally meaningless, absorbed by adjacent properties through usage over time in a process called adverse possession. But my engineer's brain latched onto it. I pulled up the county tax assessor's records. My heart hammered against my ribs when the result came back. The parcel was still listed as an independent entity. Its owner was listed as the Original Development Corporation, which had dissolved in 1995. This tiny, 18-inch by 60-foot strip of land was an orphan. Under state law, as I knew from decades of land acquisition deals, unclaimed property belonging to a defunct corporation eventually escapes to the county to be sold at public auction as surplus land. It's a process designed to get non-tax-paying, ownerless land back onto the tax rolls. The reason it had likely gone unnoticed for 35 years was its sheer worthlessness. A standard title search for a home sale wouldn't flag it because it wasn't a lien or an easement on either property. It was a separate entity entirely. No one would commission an expensive new boundary survey for a routine suburban house sale, so everyone just assumed the mowed strip of grass between the driveways was the boundary. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I pulled up the satellite imagery and overlaid my CAD drawing. The final 18 inches of Carol Peterson's concrete driveway, the crucial apron that connected her two-car garage to the public street, was built squarely on top of parcel R3. Carol's next attack was an escalation to social media. She used the Willow Creek Estates community Facebook group to post a series of thinly veiled attacks, painting me as a new resident who didn't appreciate the Willow Creek way. Her posts about unkept lawns and disregard for the rules were designed to isolate and shame me. The online crusade had real-world consequences. Neighbors who had previously given me a friendly wave now averted their eyes. The true test came at the annual neighborhood 4th of July block party. I baked a tray of my famous brownies and walked down the street with a forced smile. The effect was chilling. Conversations faltered as I approached. People suddenly found their drinks fascinating. I saw Carol holding court, occasionally glancing in my direction with a look of pure triumph. Dejected. I was about to leave when George, the older gentleman from the HOA meeting, walked over. "Don't take it personally, son," he said, taking a brownie. "You've been caught in the splash zone of Hurricane Carol. Most of these folks are just terrified of being her next target." He lowered his voice. "It wasn't always like this. She moved here with her husband, Robert, about 15 years ago. He was a big-shot lawyer. Then he left her for his paralegal, took almost everything in a very messy, very public divorce. Her kids sided with him. The HOA, this little kingdom, it's all she has left. It's the only place in the world she feels like she has any control." His words didn't make me pity her, but they did make her actions understandable in a grim, pathetic way. She wasn't just a bully. She was a woman clinging to a tiny scrap of power because the rest of her life had been stripped of it. This knowledge didn't soften my resolve. It hardened it. This wasn't just a grudge match. It was a strategic problem with a human element, the kind I was uniquely qualified to solve. I went home and contacted Janet Morales, a razor-sharp real estate attorney I'd worked with for years. "Alex, honey, you're supposed to be retired," she said. "Don't tell me you've bought a swamp." "Something much smaller, Janet," I said. "I need you to look into the process for a county surplus land auction, specifically for a remnant parcel, and I need it to be quiet. Very, very quiet." I explained the situation. "Oh, this is delicious," she purred. "A sealed bid auction for a remnant parcel. Nobody will even be there. We'll set up a shell LLC for you. Sterling Land Holdings. Minimum bid should do it. No one will ever know who the buyer is until after the deed is recorded." A week later, a city code enforcement vehicle pulled up. Carol had filed an anonymous complaint about an unpermitted commercial business being run out of my garage. I calmly showed the inspector my meticulously organized, fully permitted, and code-compliant workshop. "This is one of the cleanest home workshops I've ever seen," he said, shaking his head. We get calls from this neighborhood a lot, usually from the same person. He left, and my anger solidified. She was now abusing public resources in her private war. That evening, Janet's email arrived. The auction was in 3 weeks. The minimum bid was only $200 to cover administrative costs. My trap was ready. The final escalation was a direct, personal, and deeply vicious threat. A sleek, black sedan I didn't recognize pulled up in front of her house. A man in a sharp suit handed Carol a thick, manila envelope. An hour later, my doorbell rang. It was Carol, dressed in a severe navy blue blazer. "I've been doing some research on you, Alex," she said, holding the envelope. "Quite an impressive career. I hired a private investigator." My blood ran cold. "This," she said, pulling out a letter, "is a formal ethics complaint I have drafted to the American Society of Civil Engineers. It details how a former senior executive is running an unlicensed, uninsured, and illegal engineering and construction business from his home. It expresses a deep concern for public safety. It also includes my signed affidavit detailing your pattern of harassment and intimidation." It was a monstrous lie, but a lie on paper, sent to the right people, could destroy my reputation and jeopardize my pension. "You are going to sell your house," she said, her eyes gleaming. "You will put it on the market within 30 days. If you do that, this complaint never gets filed. If you don't, I will mail this today, and I will make it my life's mission to destroy you." A strange calm washed over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound, serene clarity. She had threatened my past, my present, and my future. She had left me no choice. "You have no idea what you've done," I said, my voice quiet, and closed the door in her face. Janet had confirmed my bid for Parcel R3 was accepted 2 days ago. The deed had been recorded that morning. The emergency HOA meeting she'd called for the following Tuesday to place a lien on my house would be the perfect venue for the finale. The night of the HOA meeting, the community clubhouse was packed. Carol had whipped the neighborhood into a frenzy. She banged the gavel. "This emergency meeting is now in session," she announced. "The agenda is a vote on Resolution 2025-14, which authorizes the board to place a lien against the property at 114 Willow Lane for continuous and hostile violations." For 15 minutes, she laid out her twisted version of history. She was masterful, weaving half-truths and lies into a compelling narrative of a community under siege. She concluded by holding up the manila envelope containing the ethics complaint, drawing gasps from the crowd. "The board asks for your support," she finished. "Are there any questions before we vote?" "I have a statement to make," I said from the back of the room. All eyes turned to me. Carol smirked. "You have 5 minutes." I walked to the front of the room, setting up a small projector I'd brought. "I won't take 5 minutes," I said, my voice calm and authoritative. "I'm here to talk about property." An image of the official plat map filled the wall behind Carol. "This is the official survey map for our community. Here is my property, Lot 46. And here is Ms. Peterson's, Lot 47. Everyone has assumed these 2 lots meet. This assumption is incorrect." I zoomed in, highlighting a tiny 18-inch sliver of land in red. This is a legally distinct parcel of land, designated as Parcel R3. Due to a clerical error, it was never conveyed to either lot. It recently became unclaimed surplus property, belonging to the county. The room was dead silent. Carol's face had gone from smug to confused. "Being a man who believes in clearly defined boundaries," I said, I took an interest in this orphaned piece of land. And so, last week, I purchased it. I clicked the remote. A high-resolution scan of an official, recorded property deed filled the screen. The buyer was Sterling Land Holdings, LLC. The property was parcel R3. As of 9:14 a.m. yesterday, I announced, my voice like ice. I am the legal owner of this 18-inch wide strip of land, which brings me to my final point. I aimed a laser pointer at the map, tracing the path of her driveway. Ms. Peterson, your driveway, which provides the only access from your garage to the public street, crosses my property for its entire width. For the past 35 years, you have been trespassing. As the new owner, I am no longer willing to grant an easement. Her face was now the color of ash. The manila envelope slipped from her numb fingers. Therefore, I said, my voice resonating with the finality of a judge's gavel, I am informing you that tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m., a fencing company will arrive to install a permanent, 6-foot-high, wrought iron, HOA-compliant fence along the full 60-foot length of my new property line. It will, of course, completely block all access to and from your driveway. A collective gasp went through the room. I stood up, packing my projector. I believe that concludes my statement. Please, vote on your lien. I turned and walked out of the silent, stunned room, leaving Carol Peterson standing alone in the ruins of her petty kingdom, publicly and perfectly checkmated. The aftermath was swift. The next morning, the crew arrived and installed the beautiful, elegant, and brutally functional wrought iron fence. It sliced cleanly across the front of Carol's driveway, imprisoning her SUV in its own garage. She screamed. She threatened. She called the police. The same weary officer from my move-in day showed up, looked at my deed, and told her it was a civil matter. Her lawyer sent a blustering letter. Janet's response, citing state property law, ended that threat immediately. Socially, her downfall was just as complete. She was transformed overnight from a feared tyrant into a laughingstock. The HOA board, led by a newly emboldened George, voted her out and began rescinding her most absurd rules. 2 months later, Carol sold her house at a massive loss and moved away. With her gone, the peace I had dreamed of finally settled over my home. My workshop became my sanctuary once more. Neighbors started waving again, then stopping to chat. My brownies became a block party staple. Sometimes, I sit on my front porch, looking at the jasmine-covered fence. It's a reminder that my peace wasn't given. It was earned. I had to fight a war to win it. I had to become the man I tried to leave behind. Just for a little while. To secure the life I wanted to live. The boundaries are clear. I am finally home.